If you want to understand the reason the restoration was necessary, you have to understand the world the first century Christians walked into. Rome did not care what you believed. Rome cared what you performed. Religion was a state machinery. Loyalty was measured through incense, and refusing to worship the emperor wasn't a theological disagreement, it was downright treason. So when Christians declared one Lord, one faith, one baptism, they were not being poetic. They were detonating a theological reality and truth. Under the entire Roman religious system, their exclusivity made them incompatible with the empire, and the pressures that followed fractured the church. This episode steps into that world and shows the reason the restoration wasn't a mere luxury, it was inevitable. Hit that like, share, subscribe, and notification bell, and we'll get into our lesson for today on apostasy to restoration. In order to answer the question, was there a need for a restoration or was there a need for a reformation of the church? Hey, everybody, this is Timothy with Faith and Reason. Welcome to the channel. I'm here to inspire you, encourage you, and edify you as we all are pressing forward with steadfast faith through Jesus Christ, because it is He that lives through us, not that we live according to our own will and purpose. Today, we're going to step into a very interesting, I'm going to continue our series on apostasy to restoration, reformation or restoration, because that really is the question. Was it about a church that needed to be reformed, or is it about a real need to radically restore lost truths and lost authority? See, when T. Edgar Lyons first penned Lesson 7 of Apostasy to Restoration in 1960, he invited Latter day Saints to step into a world where religion was not just a private conviction, it was a fundamental component of the machinery of the Roman Empire. This bold assertion set the stage for a deeper exploration of the intricate interplay between faith, culture, and politics. Now, 60 years later, we have a landscape of scholarship that has transformed dramatically our understanding of first century Greco Roman world, culture, and society. Along with that, the world and society and culture that the New Testament took place in. And so, Lyon's central insight remains strikingly relevant for us today. And to truly understand the need for a restoration, we need to immerse ourselves into the complex milieu that shaped the early Christian church. So, what I did, this is based on the 1960 Melchizedek Priesthood Study Manual, Apostasy to Restoration, and there's a companion book that I have on my shelf called uh, James Barker, um, that reflects the same title, Apostasy and Restoration. And there's a lot of good books out there for you, and I will provide a list of those books as well towards the end of this. So I've updated this lesson because I want to build upon what T. Edgar Lyons uh, built, the foundation he laid, because I want to integrate modern archaeology. I want to integrate peer reviewed historical research and contemporary Latter day Saint scholarship in order for us to come to an understanding of the context in which early Christianity emerged. Because what we soon discover, what we will discover, and what I hopefully want to help you understand is that the context in which early Christianity emerged gives us a better picture of the Roman religious world, a world that was teeming with a pantheon of gods, replete with elaborate rituals, and governed by a political theology that made the act of Christian discipleship radical as well as dangerous and perilous. So, in a society where loyalty to the state was intricately tied to the acts of sacrifice and devotion, where citizens adeptly navigated multiple cults without limit, without hint of contradiction, and where the pursuit of salvation was often sought through clandestine mystery rites and the favor of emperors. The Christian proclamation of one Lord, one faith, one baptism represented a very profound challenge to the status quo. It was nothing less than a revolutionary stance. This declaration was, in essence, a radical reformation of the religious landscape, directly opposing the established norms that dictated the relationship between the individual, the divine, and the state. Understanding that world is essential for grasping why the early church fractured amidst various pressures and the reason a restoration was not merely desirable, it was indeed inevitable. The tensions between emerging Christian beliefs and the entrenched systems of power were not just obstacles to be overcome. They underscored the urgent need for a return to core principles that was able to unify and reinvigorate the faith community. Lyon's insights encourages us to reflect on our own circumstances because in today's religious environment, there are critical questions that are being prompted. And these critical questions are about the nature of faith, the role of community, and the ongoing quest for spiritual authenticity in an increasingly complex worldview. So, as we navigate the remnants of an ancient tapestry interwoven with faith and politics, we find ourselves inspired to reconsider the implications of our shared history and the enduring quest for a true restoration. And so, let's begin with the first premise, the Roman state and the divine order. Now, when we look at modern scholarship, it confirms that Romans viewed religion as a public technology of state stability. It was not a personal path to salvation. The welfare of the empire was believed to depend upon maintaining pax deorum, the peace or favor of the gods. Recent studies emphasize that Roman religion was embedded in civic identity, not private belief. The emperor, as Pontifex Maximus, functioned as the ritual guarantor of Rome's divine protection. This aligns with historical data and may be strengthened with contemporary research showing that the imperial cult varied widely by region and was not merely political, but often deeply religious in local contexts. So, what to look for in today's lesson is number one, the ancient Roman Empire was generally believed in the reality that the welfare of the political state was dependent upon the favor of the gods. When Christianity began to spread beyond Palestine and Judea, it went into a world where many people participated in three or more religious belief systems. And so this is the context that we're stepping into, the Roman religious philosophy of state. So for us who live in the 21st century, it is very difficult to understand how Roman government officials of the first 4 centuries viewed religion. Now, if you remember lesson 3, I have it linked into the description here. I quoted Gibbon's statement, which he insinuated that the Roman political leaders were more interested in the use they could make of religion than they were with its truthfulness. Now, while this may be somewhat unfair as a generalization, Gibbon was not entirely in error. He had sensed that the Roman government was greatly concerned with the manipulation of religion as a function of the state, rather than as a search for personal salvation. Roman tradition, from its very earliest beginnings, had stressed the part that multitudinous pagan gods played as guardians of the Roman state. There had gradually been an amalgamation of the Greek Olympian religion with that of the indigenous Roman culture. Some of these gods or goddesses had been identified as the same. Zeus, for example, who was thought to be the same as Jupiter, or Dimitri, who was identified as Ceres. Others, however, had no counterparts, yet were no one the least added to the Roman pantheon. These deities were believed to have had certain functions over which they presided, and together controlled the earth and perhaps the universe as well. Roman religious psychology had come to identify the welfare of the political state with the favor of the gods. This success of the Roman legions in their conquest for the ancient world was thought to have been the result of the favor of the gods, the great Pax Romanium. The greatest period of peace in ancient Rome the world had ever known was attributed to the favor of pagan deities. If famine, floods, plagues, economic depressions, or military defeats caused disasters to a god or goddess who had been neglected, offended, or who was not properly being worshipped. To preserve the welfare of the state over a period of centuries, many deities, some from distant concerns of the empire, have been adopted by the government and provisions made for their worship at public expense. So important was the favor of the gods, thought to be for the welfare of the Roman government, an office was created that was comparable to one of the vital departments of state, such as that of war or finance. The individual who held this office was designated as the Pontifex Maximus, as chief or high priest of all the pagan cults. He was responsible for maintaining the goodwill of these deities and literally pulling down power from heaven on behalf of the Roman Empire. So, when we look at this, when we understand this, this brings a serious point of view that was accepted by Roman leaders with regards to the success of the Roman armies, because it was viewed as a blessing of the gods. Contrawise, a defeat of the Roman army was interpreted as the result of some offended god or one that the Romans had not yet adopted for worship or that had not been added into their pantheon. And there are instances of the Roman Senate sending an investigation committee to outposts on the frontier of the empire to seek the cause of a military defeat by learning of some local god whom they did not know. Having found the neglected deity, provisions was made for winning him over to the Roman side by importing his worship into the empire as a method of gaining his favor. These ancient forms at Rome was a mass of pagan temples and shrines representing deities from many parts of the ancient world. These were established as part of the governmental policy for seeking divine aid for the political state. It was into such a diversified religious viewpoint and worldview that Christianity came by way of introduction. Now, how the masses in the Roman Empire viewed religion? Well, it's difficult and also dangerous to generalize and simplify when discussing the religion of the millions of people who constituted the ancient Roman Empire during a period of several centuries. However, in order for us to present a picture of how people viewed religion, we need to risk the dangers of such generalization. It was apparently no uncommon thing for a person to profess interest in and actively engage with more than one form of religious devotion at the same time. In fact, it was not unusual for many people to have three or more religions simultaneously. These religious loyalties were often different from what we think of as religions, but in the ancient world, they were viewed as such. These may be classified as the political religion. Because of the Roman religious philosophy, there gradually evolved an idea that the personage of the empire was an embodiment of the favor of the hierarchy of gods toward the empire, especially after the time of Julius Caesar. This concept grew and found expression in the construction of the temple of the deified Julius on the Roman Forum. In the second and third centuries, the Christians found themselves in difficulty because of this so called emperor worship, which had become a cult of the state. The emperor cult offered no promise of salvation. It gave no promise of immortality, and it did not offer consolation or inspiration in times of distress or need. It was, for our standards, a loyalty cult for the purpose of inculcating support for the political state. In various cities of the empire, altars were erected. Priests of this cult supervised sacrifices, which usually consisted of the burning of incense. In times of stress or suspected disloyalty, citizens were required to appear before this altar or temple, offer a bit of incense, and then be given a certificate known as a libellus, which verified that the dated act of such offering and that the bearer had recognized the gods of the empire. As we view this act now, it was perhaps quite akin to our present day pledging of allegiance to the flag or a formal affirmation of our political loyalty to a sovereign nation. To the ancient Roman citizen, it indicated an acceptance of the idea that the well being of the state was due to divine blessings. Viewed from this position, one who refused was guilty of an offense against the gods and was termed an atheist. Yet atheism, when so considered, was also looked upon as anarchy, because the person who was guilty of failure to offer sacrifice was thought to be against the emperor as well as the gods. Hence, the Romans drew no distinction between atheism and anarchy. They were one and the same. And then this brings us to the idea of the emperor cult as a political religion. The emperor cult is now understood as a complex, local adapted phenomenon, not a monolithic imperial imposition. This multifaceted aspect reflects the diverse ways in which different cultures within the Roman Empire interpreted and integrated emperor worship into their own societies. In some regions, emperor worship was not just a personal belief, it was a civic duty that citizens were expected to observe as part of their responsibilities to the state. This practice often reinforced community at, as well as fellowship, where it ties and contributed to a sense of shared identity among the populace. Festivals, rituals, and public ceremonies dedicated to the emperor became occasions for communal gathering and celebration, emphasizing loyalty to the emperor and the empire. In other words, it functioned as a genuine religious devotion where the emperor was seen as a divine figure deserving of honor and reverence. In such contexts, the boundary between political allegiance and religious belief became blurred, with the emperor's role transcending mere governance to embody a spiritual leader who connected the divine with the earthly world. Christians were persecuted not for theology, they were persecuted explicitly for refusing civic participation, which Romans interpreted as political disloyalty. This refusal was rooted in a profound commitment to their faith, which called for exclusive devotion to God and outright rejection of any form of idolatry, which includes the veneration of the emperor. The civic expectation to honor the emperor with offerings such as incense placed Christians in a very difficult position where their religious beliefs fundamentally clashed with the then cultural and social norms of the day. This reinforces the historical point. Refusal to offer incense was seen as treason, not merely impiety. And such actions were perceived as direct challenges to the stability of the empire and its authority, as they threatened the foundational beliefs of loyalty and unity among citizens. Thus, the persecution of Christians may be viewed as a reaction to their unwillingness to conform to the broader expectations of Roman society and culture, highlighting the intricate relationship between religion, politics, and identity in the context of Roman Empire. Local deities and regional religious identity is where we get into the next point. Modern scholarship stresses that local gods were not minor, they were central to community identity. These deities were often tied to agricultural blessings, protection, or civic prosperity, which were vital for the well being and survival of ancient societies. Worship was inherited, not chosen. Matching your original manuals, matching Line's original description in Apostasy to Restoration, this reflects a deep rooted tradition where familial and community ties played a crucial role in religious practices and the veneration of local gods. Through new research, it shows that inscriptions reveal how local cults were used to reinforce militarized landscapes within Roman authority, especially in frontier zones. The relationship between local deities and the imperial framework illustrates how religion was both a means of control and a source of identity for peoples living in these regions. The intertwining of local cults with Roman power dynamics highlights that these gods were not simply local deities, they were significant players in the broader socio political landscape. The religion of local deities was deeply permeated with a sense of belonging and protection. Most every religion of the ancient world had legends concerning some one of the pagan deities that had chosen their locality as a guardianship and showered unusual blessings upon that region. For instance, Artemis, Diana, was revered as the protector of Ephesus, where her temple became a center of worship and a symbol of city pride. Similarly, Athena, Minerva, held a place of honor in Athens as the patron goddess, embodying the city's values and aspirations. Helios, Apollo, was said to have favored Delphi, making it a significant religious sanctuary. Other deities may also be cited as safeguarding various cities, areas, islands, or states, imparting a sense of security and continuity to their form of worship. These divinities were concerned, according to ancient traditions, with providing blessings of olive trees, grapevines, grains, and livestock to mankind, essential commodities for ancient economies. Sacrifices were offered for the continuation of these blessings as people sought favor and nourishment from the gods that governed their daily lives. This close interaction fostered an environment where local deities were revered and their influence acknowledged. Once outside of the locality which a god favored, a former devotee would probably accept the god that was locally worshipped in his new loyalty and locality, indicating a fluidity in religious practices that allowed individuals to adapt to their surroundings while retaining some connection to past beliefs. These deities gave the people no promise of religious certainty and therefore did not fulfill the need that people felt for something more satisfying and enduring than the mere blessing of material wants. Consequently, the worship of local gods often coexisted with the broader philosophical and spiritual inquiries that sought deeper meaning beyond immediate material benefits, illustrating the complexity of belief systems in the ancient world. And so when we look at this, we come to the next point, which is the personal religion and the rise of mystery cults. In the 1960 Melchizedek Priesthood Manual, it accurately notes that Romans sought personal assurance of salvation. Modern scholarship deepens this perspective. Mystery cults, Mithras, Isis, Dionysus, etc., offered an initiation, belonging, and hope for the afterlife. These cults flourished in Rome because they provided what traditional civic religion was not able to provide: personal transformation and eschatological promise. Unlike the state sponsored religion, which focused primarily on maintaining societal order and appeasing deities for material blessings, mystery cults engaged individuals on a much deeper level, allowing for personal connection and individual hope. Recent studies indicate that mystery cults were not marginal, but central to Roman religious life, significantly shaping how later Christians understood their own rituals, community, constructs, and the overarching concept of salvation. The dynamics of these cults challenged the accepted norms of religious practice and belief, which introduced more subjective experiences of faith than the rigid practices found in citizenship based religions. As to personal religion, one of the most universal phenomena among human beings is their request for and belief in some form of religious conduct or worship that will assure salvation in the eternal worlds and give hope to the discouraged, the distressed, and those in mourning. The religious tied strictly to civic identity did not offer any foundation for personal assurance or transformation. Rather, they were inherited systems where the individual had little to no choice. The local divinities were simply accepted parts of one civic duties and devotion, with limited connection to personal faith or experience. On occasions when the locality celebrated the natal day of the deity or commemorated the founding of a city or colony that had received favor from these deities, the townspeople might dress in festive attire, engage in processions, and make offerings. However, once the ceremonies concluded, the assurance for a good harvest or favorable outcome in this life did not extend beyond the material. What promise was there that after death, life would continue in the eternal worlds? The stark reality was that these religions were largely inherited rather than chosen, leading adherents to take part in rituals as part of their civic obligations rather than out of a profound belief. Thus, for the average Roman citizen, the act of participating in these religious provided little assurance of spiritual security or personal fulfillment. Testimony and conversion to such religions were not considered. These systems offered no space for true conversions or even individual testimony. It was within this context that the Apostle Paul and other Christian missionaries carried the gospel of Jesus Christ, which presented a radically different message from anything found in any existing belief system. The people to whom Paul preached were in search of hope, hope of religious security, personal agency, and spiritual connection. They longed for something they could actively choose, a transformative experience that would grant them true conversion and a definitive testimony regarding their faith. This yearning for personal belief led to the rapid spread of Christianity, as it offered individuals not only a means of engagement with the divine, it offered a profound assurance that they had been personally chosen and redeemed, standing in stark contrast to the inherited practices of their day. Such a transformative gospel met a deep seated need within the heart of the Roman populace, allowing Christianity to flourish and deeply influence the subsequent spiritual landscape. The philosophers and intellectuals of the day may have viewed such searching and yearning as pure superstition. Many of them had outgrown many desires for religious certainty for a quest for immortality. The group, however, represented only a small percentage of the total population of the empire. The widespread existence of pagan shrines in the Greco Roman world is indicative of the popularity enjoyed by the many pagan religions during the early centuries of Christianity. It is impossible to even estimate the number of followers each deity may have claimed, as there was a possibility of each person participating in several such groups simultaneously. The concept that a god would be jealous of a person who showed loyalty to another god did not enter into the consciousness of the masses. Their primary concern was to find a promise of certainty. It was in this area of personal choice that the mystery and hero redeemer cults flourished. Their popularity with the masses indicates that they satisfied the needs of the people who felt that in the initiatory rites, they were securing the necessary information to assure a safe journey into the realms of the immortality and eternal life of the soul, with very few exceptions. These cults that offered personal religious satisfactions were not only left undisturbed by the Roman government, but the Pontifex Maximus encouraged and assisted them financially. If there was such a wide religious tolerance and the religions were so varied in their teachings, why could not the Christian church have been accepted and allowed to exist as one of them? The answer is found in the aspect of the Christian faith that made it impossible to meet the standards which the Roman religious officials demanded for recognition. They would have had to make compromises, and to make them would have been a denial of one of their most cherished beliefs. And so here's the reason why Christianity was not just another religion within the Greco Roman world of the first century. Historical and scholarly evidence argues that Christianity's exclusivity made it incompatible with Roman expectations. Modern scholarship broadly agrees on the foundational tenets of this incompatibility. Christianity proclaimed one God, one Lord, one path to salvation, starkly contrasting with the polytheistic traditions that were prevalent in Roman society. The insistence on monotheism not only differentiated Christians from their pagan counterparts, but also positioned them as a distinct and often contentious group within the broader fabric of Roman religious life. Furthermore, Christians rejected participations in the emperor cult and local cults, which were integral to the public and social life of the Roman Empire. By refusing to acknowledge the divine status of the emperor and the multitude of gods worshipped within the empire, Christians not only asserted their theological beliefs, but also alienated themselves from the communal practices that reinforce civic identity and loyalty. This refusal violated Roman norms of religious pluralism and civic loyalty, which were crucial for maintaining social harmony and cooperation within the empire. Adding to this discourse, Latter day Saint scholarship emphasizes that the early Christianity structure, authority, and ritual life show continuity within the primitive church. Joseph Smith sought to restore it. This perspective highlights how early Christian practices and ecclesiastical organizations were not only a reflection of theological beliefs, it also provided a framework that distinguished them from surrounding cultures in which they existed. The emphasis on apostolic authority, communal worship, and unique sacramental practices underscored a community that the Latter day Saint philosophy aims to align with contemporary faith expressions. This connection to early Christian roots may serve to validate modern practices and beliefs within the scope of historical Christianity, evolution, and its responses to the challenges posed by the Roman world. So here's the takeaways for this today, folks. The Christian may hardly be said to have embraced a monotheistic religion, as they believed in an eternal Father, in his Father's divine Son, and in a personage of Spirit called the Holy Ghost or Holy Spirit. But polytheistic in the sense that the term is used to refer to contemporary paganism, certainly with regards to um, Roman culture and society. To the Christian, there is one supreme God, the eternal Father. Christ had been a manifestation of the supreme being in the flesh, yet since his resurrection had ascended to heaven and was in the presence of the Father. Here there was no disharmony, competition, or even divergent goals. It was a belief in supreme triumvirate that had no competitors. Through the atonement of Christ, a plan of salvation had been offered, and it was likewise an exclusive plan. It was not just an additional way to gain salvation. The Christian announced that it was the only way to acquire salvation in the eternal worlds. To have accepted a place as a legal religion would have made the Christian recognize the others as equal potentials for the securing of eternal life, and would have made the Christian Godhead nothing more than an additional God in competition with many others of lower standards and sometimes questionable morals. His attitude toward his Father in heaven and his faith in the risen Lord and Savior provided the foundation for Roman government's opposition. Christianity became an illicit, outlawed, and underground religion. And so, as I've prepared this, you know, and I'm thinking about this, when you get into the history, and this is the reason why I chose to focus on the 1960 Melchizedek Priesthood Manual on apostasy to restoration, because I don't think we really, as Latter day Saints today, I don't think we really understand the scope of the apostasy. We may have some ideas, we may have some consensus of what it may or may not look like, but we don't understand the actual historical precedence of primitive Christianity, the world it was birthed into, the competition that was prevailing in the culture and society of the Roman Empire during the first century. And as I've studied this over the years, and what I am wanting to point out to you is hopefully you will see how Christianity evolved over the centuries and that it became the Roman state religion. Because remember, it began with moving Christianity out of obscurity, out of persecution, where it was no longer deemed a threat to the Roman Empire. That in fact it was through Constantine that he embraced Christianity and ended the persecution and declared Christianity Romans the Roman Empire state religion. And this moved Christianity from a outlawed religion, an illicit belief system. People declared atheists for not making their allegiance to Rome. And what is interesting is I've seen several comments coming from people where they say submit to Rome. Do you not understand when you say submit to Rome, you're literally mirroring the problematic issue of first century Roman Empire. When you say submit to Rome, you're literally asking people to submit to the authority of the Roman Empire, to submit to the authority of the emperor. And today, and I'm going to be bold about this, and you can disagree with me. Yeah, I'm going to point this out as we continue this series. When Christianity became a Roman state religion under the emperor of Constantine, the Pope replaced the Roman emperor as the Pontifex Maximus, the high priest of the Roman state religion. Christ was no longer the head of the church. The emperor was. The and then soon the Pope became by mere of the Roman state religion. And the church went from being a persecuted group of people, outlawed, hunted down, persecuted, called atheists, considered a threat to the Roman Empire, to a church that went out and persecuted those who they deemed to be a threat to the Roman state religion, to the Roman state religion that was declared Rome's only religious belief system. And this introduces the Nicene Creed. This introduces the creeds and the councils without apostolic authority. So when people refer to historical Christianity, and the reason why many of us who are Latter-day Saints refer to a lot of those people who hold to the creeds and confessions of Christianity, the reason when Jesus Christ appeared to Joseph Smith and says that their creeds are an abomination unto me, it is because the Christian faith was in full apostasy and became a Roman state religion, to where Christ was no longer the foundation, was no longer the chief cornerstone. There was no longer apostolic authority in operation. And this is historical, folks. This is the reality. This is the reason why I want to do this series. So do me a favor, hit that like, share, and subscribe. Hit that notification bell as we continue our study through the apostasy and restoration, answering the question whether or not the apostasy needed to occur or whether the church needed to be reformed. And check out the additional resources that I have available, and drop your thoughts in the comments section. Do you agree? What is your understanding of the Roman state religion in the first century? And how does this information help you defend the faith with reason and truth and light? Be blessed, be encouraged, be inspired as we all are pressing forward with steadfast faith through Jesus Christ, because it is He that lives through us, not that we live according to our own will and purpose.